Teaching unions continuing to express concerns at government plans to reopen schools next month in England. School leaders say they need more clarity now about how they can reopen safely and what's going to happen if there is another increase or a second wave. The Education Secretary Gavin Williamson this morning said there's little evidence that coronavirus is transmitted in schools. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson says there's a moral duty to get pupils back into the classroom and education is a priority.
The way we're trying to manage the COVID pandemic is to have local test and trace, to introduce restrictions where that's necessary. But as we've all said, the last thing we want to do is to close schools. We think that education is the priority for the country.
Let's go and talk to Mr Jewkes, the principal of Holy Rosary Catholic Primary in Wolverhampton. Adam, afternoon.
Afternoon, Paul.
You've been open since June, haven't you?
We have. We've actually been open since March to key and vulnerable children, but since June to a wider cohort.
So how are things going?
Yeah, it's been very good, actually. I think the staff have been absolutely fantastic in terms of getting the school open and sort of adapting the way we teach and the way we do things. But obviously it's going to be a big change from September when we've got all of the school back at the same time.
Well, is that feasible, do you think?
I think for us it is, because we're a small one-form entry school. I think for larger primary schools and for big secondary schools, I can imagine that head teachers have had some real logistical nightmares in terms of organising everything. So for us it's not too bad, but I think for bigger schools it would be a lot more complicated.
Just give us a flavour of the type of things you'd have to do and how you've adapted and how you will be adapting for September.
So as part of our risk assessment, we've really had to change a lot of the routines and things that go on in school. So, for example, the biggest thing is that the children will be in year group bubbles, and the bubbles can't mix with each other. So that's obviously got big implications for break times and lunch times. So we have to have one-way systems in place. We've had to zone off our playgrounds in different sections, different groups. Some children will be having their lunch in the classroom. Some children will be using the hall, but it's really just about trying to minimise the contact between the children as much as is humanly possible within a primary school setting.
So have you, or will you be explaining to the children why all this is happening?
Yeah, we'll be making a video for the children and also for the parents as well to inform them of changes, because we're having to do things like stagger and the start and the end of the days and things like that. So lots of new routines really for everybody, staff, pupils and parents to get used to before we go back in September. So I think those are the biggest challenges, really, communicating those messages to people.
How many students have you got? How many pupils?
We've got just under 200, so like I say, we're not that big a primary school, but I can imagine if you've got a big 600 plus school, you're going to have quite a lot of issues.
And what about the staff? How are they feeling?
I think the staff really are just looking forward to getting the children back and doing what we're paid to do and educating them. We've had some staff who have previously been shielding, so they'll be returning, but obviously we'll be doing risk assessment for those as well. But I think the overwhelming feeling really is to get some sense of normality back for the children.
And Gavin Williamson saying there's little evidence today that coronavirus is transmitted in schools. What do you make of what he's had to say? Does that give you confidence?
I mean, in fairness, my brother is a GP and he's been saying the same thing to me for months, actually. So I do actually believe Gavin Williamson when he says that. I think the bigger issue really is that I think a lot of children will either be asymptomatic or have very little symptoms of it and then can effectively go home and pass it on to other people. Like, I think Preston are using the public health campaign slogan of "Don't kill Granny." And I think that is actually the risk, really, that infection goes from school into household settings, then spreads amongst the community again. So I think in terms of the children, I'm not too worried about our children becoming sick or anything like that, but I think it's more the risk of it being spread within school and then out of school again.
I read one article today, saying that a priority should be testing in schools. That's for pupils and teachers. I don't know how feasible that would be in the fullness of time.
I think that would be a good thing, but again, it's who's going to pay for it, how's it going to work, how regularly could that be done. So in an ideal world, yeah, I think, Paul, that would be brilliant, but it's just whether that can actually be done in practice.
But at the moment, I mean, even before September, you were staggering start times, lunch times as well, which takes up extra staff and extra resource, doesn't it?
It does, yes, and there's no way that when we go back in September, the school will be run as we normally would. It's going to be different for the children. For example, games, lessons, anything that we might have planned to do normally indoors would now be outdoors and things like that. Certain aspects of the curriculum we wouldn't be able to do in the same way because we can't have children sharing resources and things like they would have done before. So there's a lot of logistical things really for the staff to get their heads around in terms of how they deliver the curriculum for the children.
So you feel because of the size of your school, you can get all the pupils back at the same time and cope with it. I mean, teaching unions expressing concerns, and some are saying, 1 week on, 1 week off. So you have maybe half the pupils 1 week, half the following week, which still gives parents the problem of finding cover if their children aren't at school and they can't go to work.
Absolutely, and I think also the challenge is, Paul, that when the children are not in school, as we found, that actually accessing remote learning isn't very effective. And actually, predominantly when they're off that week, they're not really going to get anywhere near the same diet as they would obviously in school as well. So that's another issue.
It's going to be an interesting few weeks. Adam, I wish you well. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Paul.
Adam Jewkes, who's the principal of Holy Rosary Catholic Primary in Wolverhampton, feels he can cope because there's only 200 students there, but obviously bigger schools might have a problem. Although Elaine, on the text, Francie, I don't know what all the fuss is about regarding schools. I just popped out, I saw 2 different large groups of children on holiday at the moment, obviously all gathered together. No social distancing. It's been going on for weeks. Well, we talked about these 125 parties and raves shut down by the police over the weekend.